Hello everybody. We left off here with the ability to create an inventory out of nothing. Now, I know it's kind of a downer to hear. You have to have done this. Please go create an inventory that creates itself out of nothing. If you understand the steps involved in doing that, the rest of this series will be easy. And by understand, I mean you have to have done them. If you just watched it in a daze and don't really, it's like, whatever, I'm sure I understand it, you're gonna get really lost. There is no way to cut and paste this code. You can cut and paste some of it, obviously, but you're gonna have to know how it works to wire it up. And therefore, please actually do what I'm doing. Create an inventory that creates itself out of nothing. I promise if you can do that, the rest of this series will be pretty straightforward, and otherwise it's gonna be hell. Sorry for the downer opening. What are we going to do today? Theory. Sometimes you have to do some theory. We're going to be focusing on making it so that when we click on these things, stuff happens. What stuff? Well, what happens when you click on an inventory item? Does it get equipped, dropped, bought, sold? You get more information on it? Open an enchantment screen? Maybe open another menu with all of those options in it. There's lots of options. How do we make an inventory that does these things? I find that in game development, a lot of newbies get really lost. For example, let's say you're making Phoenix Wright. You've got all these places, and you've got like all these buttons in each place, and you can wire each place to go to each place and all that stuff. You can set up the buttons to make you navigate the world, but how do you know what's in a given location? How do you know whether there's a character there, or whether there is a key there, or whether you've talked to someone there, or whether you've clicked on the right spot? How do you switch it out later so that there's a different but similar looking place, like the same place at night? How do you keep track of all of that stuff? Well, it's pretty hard to do with a static interface. It's very easy to get lost. It's doubly hard to do with this kind of adaptable interface. That's why it's so important that we understand the theory of how we're going to be doing it, because we have to tackle this in such a way that it makes developing your game easy, or easier at least. And in order to do that, we're going to want to keep following the same basic rules of object-oriented code. This is very much an object-oriented approach. And I know that some of you have actually gone to a college or a school and been taught in detail about the nature of object-oriented code. And a lot of you probably just are like, yeah, I know what that is, but haven't been taught or that sort of stuff. So let me just talk real quickly. The idea of object-oriented code is that each class has its own particular functionality, and it doesn't really give a shit who uses it. It doesn't care what's going on outside of that class except as absolutely required. So we started doing that by having a display class and a data class that don't know anything about each other aside from what's necessary to actually perform the role they have, the duties they have. We're going to continue with this idea. We're going to make it so that our inventory doesn't have any concept of an equipment. Our inventory has no concept of a shop. Our inventory has no concept of an enchantment. When you click on a button in our inventory, we needed to do something that the inventory has no clue about. The inventory doesn't know or care what's going on. All it knows is that something has been clicked, and screw everything else. How do we do that? We use events. Now, events are a very powerful tool, but they're also very easy to get lost in. A lot of beginners get super mired in them. I'm going to try and teach events in a very simple and straightforward way, but we're not going to be talking about them in huge detail today. We're going to get to the code tomorrow. Today we're going to set up in our minds how this is going to work. So let's go over to the blackboard. Bonk. So over here we've got a button. It's got like a sword on it. Sword! When we click on this sword, we want it to be able to do something. But what? What does it trigger when we click on the sword? Well, if we're on the equipment screen, it has to trigger an equipping. If we're on the shop screen, it has to sell it, or buy it, or compare it. If we're on the enchantment screen, it's got to open up an enchantment window. If we're on the party inventory screen, It's got to open up a trade menu to let you switch it over to another party member. There are so many options. How can we get it so that this sword communicates to all of these guys? And this is where people tend to get lost when they start game development. They're like, well, I've got all of these things that can happen. How does the thing know what to do? That sword button, how much logic are we going to have to stuff into that sword button so that it can do all this shit and know which of these is active? Does it have to search and see, well, is the equipment screen active? If it is, I have to print out to the equipment screen. I have to look for the shop screen. Is that active? Such amount of overhead, and it just gets more and more complicated, and you stuff more and more logic. And that is the wrong way to do it. Nope, the right way to do it is to use an event. So what happens is when the equipment screen spawns into the game world, it says, okay, I am going to sign up for events. Hey, button, I want to hear from you when you are clicked. Okay, I was clicked. Hey, I want to hear from you when you're clicked. Okay, I was clicked. I have no idea what you guys are going to be doing with that information, but I was clicked. This is the great secret of object-oriented code. It's secret. It's what we're trying to teach you when we teach you about object-oriented code. This is the great strength of object-oriented code. You don't have to make everything complex. You can make each individual piece very simple and just have them communicate. So all we really need to do is make this sword have the correct events. Now, unfortunately, we're not talking about Unity events. There's no easy way for us to set Unity events up in script. I'm not aware of any easy way, at least. So we are, in fact, going to be creating C# events. Now, C# events are several orders of magnitude more esoteric than Unity events. And I'm a little bit sorry that we have to do this. I wish that Unity events had a runtime method to create them in script. But since they don't, we are going to be using C# events. They're very easy to understand, but they're very annoying to implement. Sorry, that's just the way it is. The way we're going to be doing it in the long run is we're actually going to have a C# event inside of this class here. So we're going to have, in the inventory item display class, we're going to have a C# event that's like, I don't know, C# clicked. Whatever we want to call it, it's an event. But in order to actually trigger this event, we're going to have to somehow call that event. When the sword is clicked, we want to be able to call this. It doesn't magically know that that's what we want to do when it's clicked. So we're also going to be using a Unity event. But all the Unity event does is trigger this. Now, the reason that the Unity event is so limited is because we have to set it up in the scene view outside of runtime. And that means that it can only point to itself or to a sub-object, or in some cases to a static function. But anyway, those are all very, very bad limits. So we do have to use this C# eventing, and we're only going to be using the Unity event to trigger it. The first time I recorded this, it took me 15 minutes to explain that. Well, I hope that this was clear. If not, please ask below, and I will try and clarify. But hopefully you understand the concept. Next episode, we'll actually do the C# code for it, and you'll see why it was so important that you understand exactly how this inventory is created, because I'm afraid that we're going to abuse that. We're going to do some real serious silliness involving what happens exactly when we're creating and deleting. And you have to understand how things are created and deleted in order to do that.